and I'm joined by Morgan Diamond. She's our program manager. You'll hear her voice midway through this presentation. But we are very fortunate to have the opportunity to work with you and your programs over the course of this grant, and we're excited to learn more about the fantastic work that you all are leading. As the name implies, and as Tara's shared, today we're going to spend a little time talking about key messages to be bringing out as you're doing outreach and recruitment for your programs, and some ideas on partners and activities to embed those messages into to ensure you're getting as many young people who fit the profile that you're looking to fill in your programs. So just a couple of quick housekeeping items. We're all familiar with the chat feature. Please feel free to chat questions in there. We'll also have time, of course, for questions at the end. And I also want to recognize that I know you all are experts in this area, and so please feel free to share what you've learned, tips that you've learned. There's a few points during this presentation where we're going to intentionally ask for your feedback, but also as we're going along and you think that there's something that you've done that others should hear about, please do chat that and we'll make sure to bring that into the conversation. So before even starting, I actually wanted to get a sense of where each of your programs is at as it relates to recruitment. So if you could just chat in the program that you're with and share whether you're thinking about it, you've started to conduct outreach, or you're nearly done with filling up your program. And this is how you can test who's paying attention. Or
do you want us to know or put it in the chat?
Either over the phone or through GChat or the webinar chat feature.
Oh, well, this is Lupe from MFS, and we're brand new and we're starting. Okay. But in regards to recruiting efforts, we've reached out to local churches, we've reached out to the park districts, to the aldermen, and even internally within our teams here to see if there's people within their programs that we can service.
Great. I'm seeing some are in the planning phase. Can we have a few others share either over the phone or chat? Recruiting with set information sessions and additional outreach and interviews. Wonderful. Last call. Great. So what I'm seeing so far is that we're in a range of places, with some starting to plot out what this would look like, some engaging critical stakeholders who can be instrumental partners in bringing people in, to some that are already starting to conduct interviews. So I imagine even through the work that you're starting to do, you're probably learning things, encountering challenges, and I hope that you bring that into our conversation here. Excuse me, I'm just having some PowerPoint issues, but there we go. So quick background for those of you who I have not had a chance to work with before. Young Invincibles is a national nonprofit organization committed to elevating young adults' voices in the political process and expanding economic opportunity for young adults between the ages of 18 to 34, particularly those that are underserved and left out of economic policy. And we work on higher education, healthcare, workforce, and civic engagement. We've been working in the apprenticeship space, or earn and learn policy, for a little over 3 years now, and that work is what has brought us to partner closely with Illinois Department of Commerce and Economic Opportunity. So over the last 3 years, we've researched what it would take to create young adult-friendly apprenticeships that young adults are excited about, that they're stepping into, and being well prepared to be connected to a career pathway. And so we've done extensive research on how to design apprenticeship programs, how to market them to young adults, and have even worked with prior grants to help shape how those programs should be designed to meet the needs of young adults with several barriers to success in work-based learning programs. So with our time today, we're going to share a little bit about who are young adults generally. We all probably have different visions of who are young adults, but we want to have a shared understanding there. We're going to define work-based learning and talk a little bit about why it matters, particularly from the young adult perspective, share some common myths around work-based learning that can hinder our recruitment efforts, discuss best practices in recruiting youth in work-based learning, and then, of course, opportunity for question and answer, and share some resources that we have that should support you in your work. And our hope is that by the end of our conversation, you're going to have the tools that you need to recruit young people into your career pathways programs. So I'm going to start with the term millennial. This is a loaded term, and journalists and the general public alike are often talking about who millennials are and how different they are, and they're such a tough group to understand, and they love avocado toast in their phones, and what does that mean? So we shared this quote because what we want you to know, and I'm sure you all know it because you serve young adults, but while it's easy to generalize young people as a monolithic group with the same mindset, the reality is it's actually an incredibly diverse generation, more diverse than generations prior, and they have different needs and identities, and we need to be tapping into those needs and identities in order to get them excited about the fantastic programs that you all are leading. So we have information here specific to who Young Invincibles works with. I recognize that many of you are recruiting more in this 16 to 18 range. And so I want to share some background information on those two different generations. So there is actually, depending on the ages that you're serving, potentially two different generations that you're reaching. So there's Millennials, which are young people who were born between the ages of years of 1981 and 1996, and Gen Z, which would be those who are in, they're just turning 18 now. So those of you who are recruiting more at the high school level actually would be pulling from Gen Z. So what's the difference between these two? So there's actually a lot of emerging research on this, and there's, as you might imagine, it is difficult to have clear conclusions on this, but we do know that the two groups are different. So millennials came of age when the job market was in a very severe recession. And so that was a critical life experience that has shaped how they are approaching the workforce and job opportunities. So they, despite coming of age in that tough economic time, they're optimistic, they appreciate collaborative environments. They're one of the first generations to, midway through their formative years, become connected to social media. And so in many ways, they pioneered using social media and smartphones. They rely heavily on online sources. And there's a lot of reasons for this, but millennials are accustomed to hopping from one job to the next. Part of this is an outgrowth of coming of age during a time when the economy was weak. So their first few jobs out of college typically paid pretty poorly, and so they had to move from one job to the next in order to be moving along in their career. Now, Gen Z saw their parents, saw their older siblings really fall through this recession. And as a result, they have a very pragmatic attitude when it comes to jobs. They're looking for places where they know that they will be connected to strong economic opportunity. They've grown up with social media and smartphones, and they're less likely to be job hopping and more likely to be looking to build their expertise within a role. I'll go through these next couple ones pretty quickly since you all are doing work-based learning. You know it quite well. But I think what is important to draw out here is that These are really exciting opportunities for young people. They're places where they can be getting applied skills that are aligned with the needs that employers have, ultimately allowing young people to have better employability prospects. And I wanted to just put this in the context of how Illinois writ large is approaching work-based learning. So what you'll see here is a work-based learning continuum, with apprenticeships being at the far end because that's some of where the most intensive employer engagement occurs. But we recognize that young people derive a lot of value from work-based learning opportunities across this continuum. And so before I transition it over to Morgan, just want to call out some themes that we've heard young people share that they're really excited about when it comes to work-based learning. And these are themes to bring into your recruitment, which is opportunities like this can result in higher earnings, allow young people to explore their career options. It's very difficult to understand what careers will work well for you. And one of the best ways to overcome that knowledge gap is hands-on experience. And young people are excited to meet others in their field, especially professionals. They want to have that firsthand knowledge. And we also know that young people want the skills that employers are looking for, and we know that some initial experience will lead to future job prospects, which leads to future experience.
So this is Morgan, again, a colleague of Erin's here at Young Invincibles. I'm excited to support the work that you all are doing. We wanted to open up the floor to a question just to see what kind of challenges you all are facing when you're recruiting young adults. I know that you all are in different phases of the recruitment process, but what are some of the obstacles that you've faced so far? And you can either use the chat feature, or if you'd like to speak over the phone, you can do that as well. Any challenges so far?
Well, we went to a college and career fair last night, and a lot of the younger kids were still going towards the 4-year colleges. Like, they don't realize that there's so many other opportunities.
Okay. So a lack of awareness about what other alternatives are there.
It's been promoted for so long that, go to college. And a lot of these young kids don't realize that, maybe if they're not, cut out for such academics, that there are other opportunities for them.
That's a very good one.
Just making them more aware, I guess, and letting them know that, you can do really well and you can be successful if you don't go to a 4-year school.
That's true.
And 4-year schools are expensive.
And it looks like on our chat feature, one of the challenges too is follow-up and awareness. So again, the awareness is kind of a prevalent issue in terms of just getting young adults to realize what options are out there for work-based learning or just alternatives to 4-year schools.
Right.
And I'd like to hear more details about what the challenge is with follow-up. Is it capacity to follow up? Is it responsiveness and response rate when you follow up? And to the earlier point around young adults and families and parents even, often only encouraging the college pathway, one thing I would say is grounding your response in the careers that they're interested in. So to the degree that these programs are alternative pathways that lead to the careers that they want, it's actually a huge selling point. I mean, what we can be saying in some cases is this is a low cost, in some cases no cost, debt-free pathway to a career, and you can get there even faster.
And it looks like Joshua from Skills for Chicagoland's Future, commitment and guidance about what will be best for their future. Can you speak more to what you mean by that? Let's see. they're still young and trying to figure out what their next steps will be. Exactly. So the career exploration component is a message that would be helpful to send to young adults or to youth in general who are potentially exploring work-based learning and having that as an option, whether it be apprenticeship or internship. It allows for that kind of career exploration opportunity.
Yeah, and I actually think that's one of the biggest selling points of what you all are leading is this firsthand exposure, this on-the-job component, to the degree that that's embedded in your programs, allows them to get the firsthand knowledge that they cannot get in the classroom. So we've heard young people say what they like about these programs are it gets them out of the classroom, it gets them connected to professionals, and I think it's actually one of the key selling points is that you're going to be learning skills that have immediate relevance in a wide range of fields, and you'll know pretty well whether this field or occupation is a good fit for you. And you can only get that sort of knowledge by doing programs like what we're leading.
Mm-hmm. So we appreciate you all participating and sharing some of the challenges. We hope to continue to speak to some of those as our session today goes on. As Erin mentioned earlier, Young Invincibles has done some research and did some roundtables a few years ago around what are some of the misconceptions and kind of barriers to joining young adult or youth-friendly apprenticeship programs. Now, that said, work-based learning, of course, is broader than just apprenticeships, but many of the same challenges overlap with what we found in our discussions with young people. And some of those are just around what message do we send to young adults when we are trying to recruit them? Where do we even find youth? Where can we reach out to them, whether it be social media or in person? And then really, what are some of the misconceptions and anxieties surrounding work-based learning? So we'll touch on some of those as our time goes on. Our first kind of topic is overcoming myths. So when we did some focus groups and roundtables with young adults throughout the state of Illinois, we found kind of a reoccurring theme around 4 misconceptions. So the first one is just work-based learning doesn't pay. And this is really one of the biggest issues, if not the biggest issue, that is facing those of us who are trying to reach out and recruit young adults and youth. Because what we found was that about 87% of the respondents when we did a survey said that work or pay was the most important aspect of exploring work-based learning. So if that is the biggest takeaway, then we definitely want to make sure that we are emphasizing that the opportunities, whether it be through apprenticeship, if it is a paid internship that pays, you want to make sure that you're emphasizing that. Another misconception is that work-based learning is only for college students, that an internship can only be held by either somebody going to a 4-year school or it has to be at only prestigious universities and schools, when really we all know that work-based learning is an opportunity that we can have starting in high school. It can be for opportunity youth who are disconnected from either work or from education, higher education. So this is something that we also want to tackle in our messaging to young adults. And we'll talk more about how to craft that in just a few moments. The third misconception is you can't earn credit from work-based learning. So a lot of students and their parents, when their parents are involved in the earlier stages, are concerned that if they do decide to take time to go to a work-based setting, that they won't be either earning credit for high school or that they won't earn credit that can go towards post-secondary education. And especially in the realm of apprenticeships, we know that those can be a blended model of earn and learn, so that you are earning money while you are getting credit for school or even receiving a credential that's nationally recognized later on the road for apprenticeships. Lastly, the fourth misconception is that work-based learning isn't in my community. And what we mean by that is that many young adults reported in our surveys and outreach that they were concerned that there weren't apprenticeship opportunities in their area. One thing to keep in mind, especially when we're looking to engage with disenfranchised or underrepresented communities, is that transportation can be a big barrier for them going to work sites. So one of the areas that you could emphasize is that either these opportunities do exist in your communities when that is true, or that there are wraparound services if that is available for things like transportation, or even childcare if that's something that your youth might need. So another thing that emerged from our research was that there are a lot of anxieties that young adults are facing when they are considering any kind of work-based learning. So we mentioned earlier, and you all mentioned that awareness is one huge factor in challenges to recruit young people. But even when that awareness exists, that many young adults have been intimidated to even apply. So some of the reasons that they might be intimidated is that they lack the necessary skills. And this goes back to one of the misconceptions of, is this something that's only for college kids, or this looks like a certain type of student with a certain type of GPA or level of GPA. So there is some intimidation factor there around what skills are necessary. I've never been in a workplace, for example, could be a thought that a student has, and therefore they might prevent themselves from applying if they feel like they wouldn't fit in to a certain work setting. They also kind of relatedly might not feel like they're able to understand or meet the expectations. This is particularly true for youth that you might be working with in high school who have not gone into an office setting. They might have had a job in retail or in the restaurant industry, but an office setting is different. And so they might be confused about what those expectations even look like. They're also concerned about fitting in. This goes from everything from the culture, the kind of visual culture of an office might not feel the same, all the way to, do my clothes that I wear fit into the office setting? Learning about office culture and workplace culture is something that is a valuable experience and something that work-based learning can speak to, but students and young adults might not even apply if they feel like they won't fit in. So it's our role as providers to make sure that we are speaking to that they will receive support if they have that concern. And lastly, they're concerned that the space will not feel welcoming or collaborative, especially for areas where they might be applying in careers where they haven't heard of or seen somebody who looks like them or identifies with them in whatever identity areas. They might be concerned about, is this the place that's going to be inclusive of my needs? And so we want our messaging to speak to all of these anxieties and reassure our young adults and youth that these are areas of concerns that you all would help them navigate. So along those lines, there are some messaging challenges. How do we speak to the needs of diverse groups of young adults and youth? And how do we sound hip? I think one of the biggest concerns just in kind of researching how to support you all in crafting your message is that a lot of times agencies and even companies, when they're thinking about branding, are very concerned with how do you sound cool to the young generation, especially if you don't necessarily identify as being a millennial or Generation Z. And research has emerged that although sometimes kind of using the language of young adults. If you look, for example, at a Huffington Post headline, it often sounds like a 20-year-old stereotypically wrote some of those headlines. Those can be appealing to young adults and to youth, but really the biggest factor is authenticity and honesty. So if you are honest about whether an opportunity pays or doesn't pay, and are explicit about what the benefits are of your particular program, then you are reaching young adults and youth in ways that will help appeal to them, rather than if you're using the latest kind of colloquial and young adult friendly language. The messaging challenge is around just the diversity of young adults. As Erin mentioned earlier, millennials and Generation Z aren't just one completely monolithic group of people that have the same needs and interests. It's very diverse, and oftentimes we want to make sure that we're focusing on our specific target population. So as you as providers, even in this group that we have here today, all of you have slightly different, if not very different, target audiences. And so you want to treat those audiences with the respect of their needs, as opposed to what is the need of a quote unquote millennial or Generation Z member. Let's see. Oh, sorry, I'm having a little bit of PowerPoint issue. There we go. So as you can see on this slide, speaking of the diversity of this generation, this is specific, these examples, 6 categories are specific to millennials, but the Boston Consulting Group did some research around what a millennial really is, and rather than being, again, a group that has a very identical needs, they broke it down into 6 different categories. You can see there's the main category or segment is a hippennial, where they feel like they can make the world a better place. They're very socially conscious and use a lot of social media. Then you have millennial moms who are higher income. They're a little bit on the older end of the millennial spectrum, all the way to somebody who's considered an old school millennial down in the bottom quadrant. While they're a smaller segment of the population, they're not necessarily as tech savvy or tech wired as what a stereotypical millennial is, but they also are independent, self-directed, and driven and career-oriented. So this is kind of demonstrating the diversity that exists within the millennial population, at least. But one thing that I'd like to draw your attention to is that, as you can see from some of these descriptors, millennials are, or demographic research often trends towards the needs of the middle class, if not upper class. And for those of you who are providing services to disenfranchised youth or opportunity youth, their needs might not overlap with a lot of the things that are stereotypical of either Generation Z or millennials. So for example, childcare might be a concern for some of your youth, whether they're in high school or in post-secondary or just out of school in general. Another thing might be transportation is the barrier if you're in a more rural area, or even if you're in the city and people don't have the funds to, for example, get a venture card to go to their work site. So when we're thinking of the diversity of millennials, of Generation Z, keep in mind that that diversity is even broader than what's shown on this screen. There are a lot of different needs that I'm sure you all are very well aware of as well. So in addition to just kind of the messaging platforms or messaging challenges around what are the needs of our generation, there's so many different needs of the millennials and Generation Z. There's also the concern that you all might be facing of where and how do I reach out to them? What message do I craft and how do I reach out to them? So some of those challenges might be that you might not feel that you're digitally savvy, knowing that young people do enjoy and are kind of digital natives and digital pioneers. You might be concerned that you can't match that level of digital competence that they exhibit. And even if you are aware of social media, you might not know which one is the most effective to use to reach your population, or even if you should dedicate any time and resources to in-person outreach. So what we're going to do for these next few moments is kind of talk about how to overcome these challenges of both messaging and what platform to use. So the formula is pretty simple about how you craft effective outreach campaigns. Essentially, it's just identifying a targeted message with a targeted platform, and that's how you get effective outreach. So in both identifying what your effective message is and the platform that's most effective, it's helpful and absolutely necessary, I would say, to know who your audience is. So when we're talking about knowing who your audience is, I just want to pause and just get a feel for who all you are working with. Are you working mostly with, would you say, Generation Z? Are you working mostly with millennials? Or really, what kind of are some of the specific needs? And again, feel free to use chat or you can unmute and talk over the phone. Are you all working mostly with the kind of 16 to 18-year-olds?
South side, yeah.
Okay, 18 to 24-year-olds. So again, in some ways, the designation of millennial versus Generation Z can feel a little bit arbitrary, but it's helpful to know, okay, 16 to 24. So those are pretty wide ranges, right, of needs that you might be addressing. Some of those young adults and young people might be out of school completely. Some might still be needing to have signatures from their parents in order to participate in work-based learning. So sometimes your audience in the cases of working with minors might not only be just the youth themselves, but in convincing the parents as well as what, as along the lines of what Erin mentioned earlier, of the benefits of a work-based learning program. So in knowing your audience, regardless of kind of what age range that you are working with, you want to make sure that you are being explicit about pay. Going back to what we mentioned a little bit ago, as far as pay being the primary source of concern for young adults, you want to make sure whether you're paying or not, that you're telling exactly how much it is. This is not the kind of time to just kind of allude to payment. Again, authenticity and honesty is appealing to young people. So if, for example, apprenticeships on average pay $15 per hour, that's a great amount of money. It's better than minimum wage, and it's something that you want to highlight to youth if that is something that in fact you're offering. If it's a paid internship, offer, speak to that. If it's something that you offer other support services, you want to make sure you highlight the support services that are specifically helpful to the population with whom you work. You also want to avoid jargon. Those of us in workforce development, we kind of drown in an alphabet soup of either different type of funding streams or of different agencies or even concepts. If you look back at our continuum of work-based learning, some of those we all know what they mean, but others, especially youth and maybe their parents, might not be aware of what some of these terms are. So you want to be as explicit as possible. Call it a job, call it an apprenticeship, call it a paid opportunity. But keep in mind that sometimes people don't know what that terminology is, and you might have to define it concisely. Along those lines is kind of the last bullet point on this slide, is you do want to be concise with any marketing and outreach that you do. Make sure that it is to the point and highlights kind of the top 3 or 4 benefits of your program. Along those lines, you want to make sure that you are explicit about seeking diverse candidates. We mentioned that some of the anxieties that young adults feel when they are applying to apprenticeship programs specifically, but potentially work-based learning and broadly, is that they are hesitant about whether or not they would fit in. And so if you explicitly say and directly say that you are seeking candidates from a diverse background, whether that be educationally or socioeconomic, however you define diverse and however your target population defines it, you want to make sure that you highlight that. Also, along the lines of what Erin mentioned earlier, speaking to both parents and to youth themselves, the fact that work-based learning is often a low cost or no cost or debt-free, I should say, pathway to advancing your career is definitely a message that we found through our focus groups resonates with the target populations of either youth, especially disenfranchised youth, or really just young adults in general who are kind of facing skyrocketing tuition fees for 4-year universities. You also want to make sure that you, in summary, have let the youth know that there's availability in the community for these apprenticeships. Or for work-based learning opportunities. So if you have, if you know kind of a zip code, for example, where most of your young adults and youth are coming from, and there's availability of a position or an opportunity in that zip code, you want to make sure that you highlight that. Or again, going back to the support services that are offered, if there's transportation available, you want to make sure that you highlight that as well. So those, in kind of summary, are the messages that matter to capture the attention of young adults. And saying all of this in kind of as concise a way as possible on either flyers or, as we'll talk about in a few moments, in social media is going to be helpful in terms of appealing to young adults when you're trying to recruit them into your program. One last kind of takeaway too along messaging is that visuals are part of your message. It's not just what you say, but as the saying goes, images or pictures are worth 1,000 words. if, for example, you're recruiting young adults into an industry where they aren't typically there isn't typically a lot of diversity. For example, in the trades, if you are wanting to recruit both young men and young women, trades often are dominated by men. So if you would like to expand that pool or recruitment pool to women, make sure your marketing material has a woman in it. If you're in a field that is not traditionally seen as diverse racially or ethnically, then make sure you have a diversity of ethnicities represented on your flyers. One of the hesitancies we talked about earlier and the anxieties is that it won't be an inclusive work environment wherever the young adults are thinking about for the work-based learning. And if you show in your flyers and explicitly state in your messaging that you are seeking diversity, then that goes a long way to helping recruit a wide range of youth. So I'm going to pause here for another kind of question just to get you all just some more interaction. So what do you all think are the top 3 needs of the youth with whom you work? And then we can kind of just brainstorm together about how to craft those messages and what to highlight. So again, you can either use the chat feature or you can speak over the phone. So I'll just pause for a few minutes to get some feedback on what you think the top needs are of the youth you work with. I'm a millennial myself, so I have my on-demand. I'm used to seeing iPhones that have the message so I can see if people are typing. Oh, there we go. Transportation support, workplace conflict resolution, career mapping. Okay. So transportation support. So for Skills for Chicagoland's Future, that is definitely something to highlight, whether you offer venture passes or kind of commuting options. That's definitely something to offer. Workplace conflict resolution. If you have any job readiness training components to any of the services that you offer, you definitely want to make sure you're highlighting that that is an option that you all will provide for them. And then career mapping, letting the youth know that there is opportunity for you to do career exploration in work-based learning is, as Erin mentioned, is something that's important to highlight as well. And then I see another response is steady income. Great, yes, they need steady income, opportunity for advancement and supportive services. Again, those are perfect examples of kind of the needs aligning with the message that we mentioned earlier around payment and offering support services. Knowledge. So this is a great opportunity to gain knowledge and support services, and a realistic transition to economic stability. So that is something to highlight. A lot of times young people don't want to just do yet another program, but not really see what's in it for them for the long term. So even with parents, that might be something to highlight, that this is not just a summer program, for example, but something that could translate into long-term stability for their children. So if there aren't any questions, and please feel free to type them in around messaging, or we can have some time at the end. We'll move on to platform.
Yeah, I can talk to Lisa about
Oh, okay. There was one last question, or one last option is benefits from employers, insurance, and 401k plans for the future. So if those are offered at the employment sites, you definitely want to highlight that. One challenge is the long-term opportunities versus kind of short-term thinking that adolescents in particular are just developmentally known for. I mean, that your frontal lobe isn't completely done developing until you're 25. So retirement planning is definitely a benefit to highlight, potentially to parents, but for a 16-year-old, that might be a little bit more further down the road than what they're initially thinking. But for some, they're definitely 16-year-olds who are thinking about retirement. So if that speaks to your audience, I would encourage you to include it. But lastly, it's kind of the platform piece. of the formula of getting effective outreach, I wanted to just talk to you all briefly about some of the different options you have for reaching out to your young adults. So the first one is digital outreach, of course, because we have talked about how they're digital natives, both millennials and Generation Z, and then face-to-face, because face-to-face interaction is not dead, and it's something that can still provide a lot of value. So one of the reasons that digital outreach is important to have as a way of using your message and sharing your message with as wide a range of your target population as possible is because 91% of online adults use social media daily. And so one way or the other, your youth that you're working with are more than likely going to be on some form of social media. And if you want to reach them, you're going to have to embrace some form of social media as an effective way to do some outreach. So why use social media? Well, one, as we said, is because that's where the young adults and youth and pretty much everybody is at some point during the day. It's also relatively cheap and effective. It's measurable. So whether that's measurable in terms of how many likes you receive on a post, or you can even use some data analytics features and things like Twitter to see how many people have reviewed a post that or a tweet that you've sent out. It is a measurable way to see how effective your outreach is. And it's also interactive. So it's a great way to answer questions and dispel myths. One thing that I would say is to caution is that when we say that social media is cheap and or free in some cases, that doesn't take into consideration that it does take staff time. So you do want to make sure that you have staff that are trained or knowledgeable on how to use social media, and recognize that that staff time is in many ways a cost to your agency. So it's not completely without its cost. But that said, a lot of people are kind of terrified of social media if they're a little bit more used to face-to-face interaction. And so I just wanted to touch on how to navigate the top 3 platforms of social media and how to use them to recruit young adults. So the first one is Facebook. It's kind of the grandfather of social media. And because it is the grandfather, it has the reputation, at least among youth, of being a little bit outdated. It's the platform that their parents use or their uncles and aunts use. So they're a little bit more hesitant to use it. But that said, it still has the biggest following of all of the social media audiences. Just to give you a little fact, it's 2.27 billion monthly active users worldwide are on Facebook. So it is a huge portion of the planet, and our young adults and youth are using it to some extent. It's also, because of its biggest following, you can get kind of the biggest bang for your buck with your target audience. But increasingly, Facebook requires money in the form of ads to reach people. So some of the tips that you can use when you're navigating Facebook is to make sure that you invest in small amounts of well-targeted ads or boosted posts if you feel like using some funding for that. But the good thing is that Facebook, you don't even necessarily have to buy an ad in order to reach your audience. You really can. If you have, for example, case managers at your agency, they often friend their participants or clients on Facebook, and they can reach out via Facebook that way, just by sending a message or posting on their own Facebook page, or at least a professional version of their Facebook page. Facebook also, another tip is that their algorithms of how they direct postings favor less text and more visuals. So the more photos that you post, the better in terms of reaching your audience. And this generation is more accustomed to seeing photos via Instagram in terms of just kind of associating branding with a concept. Facebook also favors live video. So consider shooting short videos, live videos, where you can, for example, introduce your audience or your targeted audience to a current participant in one of your work-based learning programs and let them hear from that person's experience. Also, because Facebook is interactive and Millennials and Generation Z have kind of on-demand type personalities in general, you can use the Facebook Pages app so that you can manage your Facebook page on the go with your mobile phone, as opposed to having to be at a desktop. So those are just some tips to use with Facebook. In terms of Facebook Live, if any of you haven't used Facebook Live, it is a great interactive tool that will allow you to have a speaker, again, talking about their experience or letting students meet their staff. It's also a good opportunity to have kind of a behind-the-scenes look at or work-based or a work site. So if you wanted to take a video of an employer site where your apprenticeship program, for example, is located, then you can use Facebook Live, invite people, let them know, your audience know in advance when the Facebook Live is going to go. That way they can feel kind of in the moment experience of what it's like to work in a setting and kind of ease some of those anxieties they might have about what that workplace even looks like. Again, make sure to promote your live events and always shoot horizontally instead of vertically if you're going to have more than one speaker. So this might take some investment in terms of getting the proper equipment, but it is a great way to reach young adults. Another platform that I'm sure you all have heard of, if not used frequently, is Twitter. So Twitter is great because it's frequently updated. It allows for kind of breaking news and can reach a younger and more diverse audience than Facebook. That said, it doesn't have quite as many users as Facebook, but it is seen as something that young adults and youth use more often. Has about 68 million users in the United States, just if you're curious about how many they actually have. Twitter is great because you can amplify the same messages frequently. Hashtags are a great way to capture kind of the feeling of the moment. For example, we just came off of the elections. So if you had hashtag election 18, anybody who's kind of following that hashtag, you can emerge in that conversation. It allows for replies and retweets. So it's very interactive. And you can actually call out people by using kind of the @ function. So if you wanted to say, reach out to a particular client that you knew had a Twitter account or a Twitter feed, you could use the @ function to get them involved in the Twitter conversation. Twitter chats are also a great way to have people kind of talk through just kind of what's going on in the moment. So just make sure that you reach out to potential partners ahead of time and send a question out to partners. Twitter and Facebook I know we're going through it kind of quickly, they all have great help features on their websites, so that if you're curious about any of these functions and really how to exploit them, I do recommend going to their websites, the help features, and they have a lot of great tutorials as well. Instagram is kind of the visual king or queen of the social media. It skewers younger and female, so if you are trying to reach a female audience, then Instagram is great. It's also the only challenge, or one of the challenges of Instagram, is that it's difficult to translate into action, and you can't use as many links. You can put them in the caption feature, but it's not necessarily easy to kind of direct people to a particular site unless they're reading the captions. But one thing about Instagram that's really great, in addition to it being a visual platform, is that it allows you to do stories. Stories, if those of you who are familiar with Snapchat, allow kind of basically short compilations of either videos or pictures that are related to either a specific time period, and they disappear after 24 hours. So they have captured the immediacy and the kind of on-demand needs that a lot of young people enjoy. But they also kind of it's not Snapchat, so you don't have to have as many accounts as would be needed if you had a Snapchat and Instagram account. So using the stories feature does allow things to kind of pop up similar to like a Facebook Live, where it's people can kind of interact while a story is taking place. And you can actually use polls and questions to make sure that anybody who has a question related to an Instagram story, again, maybe a behind the scenes look of an employer's worksite, they'd be able to ask questions. So in terms of building your social media following, just make sure that you build partnerships with each other and share each other's posts. Use existing channels like email lists to build out your social media and drive traffic to any of your accounts, and invest small amounts into advertising, but again, that's not necessary. Social media isn't the only way, though, to reach young adults electronically. You can do email, which has a higher action rate, and it has easier to expand in terms of just adding people's email to your list. But it can, again, only go out to people who are already within your sphere of influence. So just like with all of the marketing, make sure that you keep your emails brief, concise, to the point, and make straightforward language about the benefits of your program. Social media is not the only way. Email is not the only way. Face-to-face still has benefit with young adults and youth. So if you create flyers and marketing materials, make sure that you disseminate those or distribute those at places where young adults are. So namely their schools, social events, festivals, especially here in Chicago. We're known for our street festivals during the summer. So maybe having tables and availability there to do some outreach, going into restaurants. And one area especially that we wanted to highlight was local workforce boards. Getting your information to those workforce boards who then can spread it out to their referral networks and employer networks is also a great way to reach out to young adults. Face by proxy. Now, one of the biggest things about Generation Z and Millennials is that they rely heavily on the influence of their peers. You all have maybe heard of the term influencers. So you want to make sure you capitalize on the young adults you're already working with to influence their friends to come out and join a work-based learning program. So encourage the young adults in your sphere already. Tell their parents to tell other parents. But there are also opportunities to get face-to-face or by mouth or by word of mouth interaction by just kind of spreading the word through faith leaders. I know somebody mentioned that they already are reaching out to churches and employers themselves who often have young employees that could then again influence their friends to try out work-based learning. So some of the resources that we wanted to highlight just before we wrap up today. You'll see that there are some sample flyers here that you all can use and tailor to your own needs. Again, remembering that you want to highlight a diversity of young adults in your images, and you want to make sure that you highlight payment and other support services that you might offer for young adults. So those resources, you see the link here at the bottom of the page, and I know that one person asked, is this PowerPoint going to be shared with us? This will be available for you all after this PowerPoint, and the resources will be available to you all after today's session. So feel free to kind of explore on Illinois WorkNet's site. But if you have any questions, we'll just open up the floor for questions now. Just any brief questions.
And this is Tara. I just want to kind of piggyback on what you guys said about, our goal really for these Wednesday webinars is for you guys. It's only 7 organizations that we have this time. So for you guys to kind of build a community and a partnership with each other and share ideas as well. So if you have clients, and we did share in your binders in the first part of it, actually, each agency, what their project is. So if you have any clients and they want to do nursing, hey, Asian Human Services is doing that, or they want to do manufacturing, we have agencies that are doing that. So like I said, our main goal, and I know for sure mine, and I'm going to drive that with you guys, is for you, the 7 organizations that we're working with, to really feel comfortable with each other and build the rapport over these Wednesday webinars. All right, anybody have any more questions? We want to wrap up. I just want to be respectful of your time. We're 1 minute over at this point. So, all right. Thank you so much, Erin and Morgan.
Tara,
We really,
just one real quick. I just wanted to let everybody know that all the resources are available in the partner guide, and I'll show you just real quick if I can here. I'm going to share my screen here real quick. And it's available in the partner guide. If you go to your illinoisworknet.com YCP partners, we have it in a couple places. If you go to the full list of resources, They are all over here under recruiting. And so they had, Young Invincibles had also provided some additional images and graphics and different resources that you could use. The PowerPoint is available here. It is a PowerPoint. I'll change that text so you know this is the PowerPoint that was used and the date it was used. But it's available on this page. And
Natasha, I don't know if it's just me, but I can't see your screen. Is anybody else?
oh, is it not sharing?
No.
Okay.
I can stop sharing mine. I'm not sure if that will help.
Yeah, hold on. Let me find my toolbar. Where's my toolbar? Oh, there we are. New share. How about this? Share. Now is it sharing?
Nope.
No, it still says question.
Oh, right. Well, let's just.
Oh, here you go. Now we can see. Perfect.
Now you can see it? Okay. So it's available in your partner guide, and it's under the full list of resources. It's under partner training. It's actually in a variety of places, but if you want to go into the training area, we have the full list of resources, or all materials for today's webinar, but it's also under the full list of resources as well. So just know that your partner guide is the place where you should always be able to find the most updated information. And I'm going to put it in the chat pod real quick. All right.
Awesome. Thank you, everyone, again, for your time. We really appreciate it. Let us know if you have any questions. Please, please, please get those training provider updates in the system so we can go ahead and approve them and you guys can be on your way. If nothing else, have a great one, and we will see you guys soon, next week.
Thank you.
Alrighty.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.